Welcome to the Elevated Edge podcast. My name is Naeem Smith. I just got done interviewing Alex Tech, who gave some very practical tips and tricks regarding leadership. If you're currently a top performer and wanting to become a leader, this episode is for you. Let's get straight into it. So Alex, what are some things that leaders do that can create a strong culture within an organization?
So my first take on this is I think that culture is built by consistent behavior over time. So it's built by what leaders reward and what they tolerate is what I would say. So if I had some drivers for that, I would say having a clear mission. People want to feel a part of something meaningful that's bigger than themselves. People show up for that, paired with recognition. So I think that recognition fuels performance, and people are going to repeat what gets recognized. And inside of that, I think that shared hardship is something I would say. What I mean by that is creating like a brotherhood. We've talked a little bit about this in the past, but having your guys go through some type of crucible together that they can, like a trial by fire, that they can go through and learn through. It's the same reason that I think military teams, platoons, they have such great culture is because they're going through some really, really difficult things together. And you can do that through the job, through knocking doors. We have a lot of early mornings, blitzes, late canvassing days, team events. Those things are going to start to create that brotherhood inside of the team that you're building, and that's going to make a really solid culture. But it's not just, what's written on the wall, like a team slogan. It's the nonverbal stuff. It's the things that people feel when they show up. And so I guess to help create that deeper too, I would say like get to know who people are outside of the doors and see what drives their personal lives. Take an interest in who they are besides, the guy or the girl that makes you money. And people don't, who was it? Was it Brian Tracy? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But those are the best things I would say about culture is it's consistent behavior over time based on what you reward and what you tolerate. So make sure that you're rewarding the right things and not tolerating things that you don't want a part of your culture.
Yeah, and to go a little bit deeper, I really like because obviously in our opportunity, when you're in sales, you do a lot of stuff in the job, whether it's trainings, whether it's being on the doors, stuff outside of the job. Especially when you're a leader, there's no better saying than being where your feet are, because really you can really impact people tremendously well in that opportunity instead of like being on your phone trying to recruit the next person when you're actually with someone that's brand new in the opportunity or someone that you haven't fully gotten to know yet. Then it's an opportunity where you can really get to know them and create a really strong culture within right there. So I really like what you have to say there.
Yeah, that's a hard one to balance sometimes, right? Especially if you're a newer leader, because you want to do all of these things. You have so much stuff spinning around like in your brain. And you're like, I need to do this, I need to do that. Like we just promoted a guy on our team, right? And that was his first thought when he calls me. He's like, dude, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I got to do this. I got to show up here. I'm like, slow down, man.
Yeah.
You need to go knock doors.
Yeah.
Same thing. Nothing's changed.
Yeah. So my next question is, as a leader, how do you raise the standard on a team, but you don't micromanage day in and day out?
And this was kind of the conversation that I had with that rep, right? But I've had to struggle through this. Like that's the idea. That's the secret sauce is how does you have everybody produce more on the team and have the organization grow with you being less hands-on, not absent, just everybody's roles change, right? And so I think that piggybacking off of the last question, standards come from your culture, not supervision. And so you want to create a standard of personal responsibility and winning. And so in the beginning or early on, you got to lead by example. You got to be the guy that does it. Like you said, be where your feet are. Uh, People need to know what the standard is before they're going to follow it. And so if the leader is out there working hard, the team feels it. A lot of people have been on a team where the leader just stops working. All of a sudden, the team starts to crumble. The production starts to crumble. Nobody knows really where they are. Uh, and it could have been from that micromanaging. There's a lot of reasons it could happen, but people don't listen. I don't think people listen to leaders, they watch them. And it's mirroring those behaviors. But I think another way you can not micromanage as much is to make the expectations super visible. Scoreboards, team chats, leaderboards, recognition, things like that. If everybody's working towards the same thing and they know where they stand, then they're going to own that. They're going to have some personal accountability to show up for their goals because it's something that's right in front of their face every day. And I think high performers love transparency. Make sure everybody knows where they stand. You can, I think also recognition and celebrating the right behaviors is a way to prevent micromanaging. And so not just like results or sales and as far as celebrating behaviors, but uh, door count. Who's coming to all the meetings, who is helping the teammates, who shows up early. Like those things need to be celebrated too, because they're all a part of your culture and your standards. And you raise those standards, you're going to be doing a lot less micromanaging. But once that is the standard, then everybody's going to rise to that. But I think that, yeah, like we said, culture is built by what leaders reward and what they tolerate, and growing beyond that. Like once you have your team and you have those standards, I would say uh, it comes to empowering the right people. And that's beyond just like that level one growth when you're trying to split off a team or find new managers and things like that. Empowering the right people can take a lot of micromanaging off your plate. So find the people that want more. Find uh, who's capable of more and give it to them. We've heard this a lot in the industry, but 80% as good as you is good enough. And I really, really believe in that. And it takes a lot of putting your pride aside to hand over that control. But if you don't do that, you're never going to grow into your potential. They're never going to grow into their potential. Eventually, you're going to burn out and it's not going to work for your organization. But one of my favorite books on this in regard to standards micromanaging is, what was it? You might have read it, Naeem. Who Not How. But I think it's
Yep.
Dan Sullivan. But anytime you're wondering, like, how do I get this done? Who's going to take this, or how do I get this work taken off my plate? That's the wrong question. You already messed it up. Like, you need to find a who or a person that you can empower to take on that role and to take that off your plate. But I think the more you organize those things, the less time you should be finding yourself micromanaging anything.
Yeah, and there's 2 points on that that I really would like to dive in a little bit deeper. One is, what are some of the traits from an actual leadership perspective when you're looking to maybe promote or to invest in the right guy or girl to become a leader? What are some of the traits that you look in from that person?
It's pretty consistent with the reps that I look to hire, to be honest. Well, they have to be good at the job, right? There's no skipping steps. You have to be proficient at the work. You don't have to be the top performer. It's great if you are, but there's a lot of top performers that are not good leaders. And we've seen that a lot in the industry where people get promoted because they're the top guy and everyone expects them to be a leader, but it's just not their path. But I think they have to be good at the job. They have to have processes that can be duplicatable. And it's even better if they're your processes, because then it's duplicatable through the whole team and through the whole organization. But intangible characteristics that I look for is uh, how coachable are they? You know, if somebody, how willing to be wrong, right? Uh, like when you say go and learn sales, it's fail forward, go and mess up and we'll figure it out later. And you get through a lot of that, but you have to do some of that stuff with leaderships too. It's just on a bigger scale. Like, how afraid are you to mess something up with a team, with a recruit, and say, shoot, I messed that up. How can I do it better? And own that mistake. But I think that's the biggest one, is somebody who's going to be able to, not afraid of failing, but not afraid of learning. But if you can have that type of individual in the right room with with the right skill set, then I think you can mold that person into a really great leader.
Okay, and then the other part that I'd like to talk a little bit more about, because I know you're currently implementing this in your organization right now. You're doing what we call fire teams. And with that, that's something that has led to not having to necessarily micromanage the day to day. And I would like you to kind of explain the process regarding like how a fire team is structured and what are some of the big takeaways that you've had from it.
Yeah, I love it. And it was necessary in our market. And I think it's going to work really well. We'll find out. But just like the stuff we've talked about, I practice this stuff. You know, it's not just things I've read or learned on podcasts. Like we're going through it as leaders and men and maturing in an industry. And these are just things that have worked, things that haven't worked. And we're always doing the best with the information we got at that current moment, you know. But necessity, excuse me, for splitting fire teams was I had a couple of really solid leaders in market. And I guess visually, I've seen a lot of teams in market grow vertically really fast, really quick. If something is off with the culture or you have a few guys leave, that welcomes in like a toxic environment really quickly. And that what I think we're doing by doing the fire teams, and that's just having one big family, but having several different teams inside of that family that are sort of competing against each other in order to grow and reach a common goal for the family, so to speak. But what I look at is it's creating the organization wide before it goes tall. And it's a big sacrifice on, you know, your part, my part, because you're pouring a lot into, instead of just one organization, several organizations, and you're trying to do it in a very fair, transparent manner. It works in Denver right now because we have the right guys to do it with. You know, uh, we are a team first and a family first. If it was a different type of organization, it might not work the same. But we had the right guys in the right time that needed to be empowered, that want to grow, that want to help each other, and that's all come to alignment with what Gold and what we're trying to do too. So for us, honestly, like it was a no-brainer. What was the second half of your question? That was just kind of like the goal and the necessity of it.
Yeah, really, really some of the things like structurally, what are some of the things that like tactically you've seen from creating fire teams?
Uh, tactfully, what have we seen? Well, inter-office competition, but also support. I think is the biggest thing that we've seen. I mean, we can get into recruiting too, like helping take things off of my plate. This is the biggest thing for me. I guess I can start there. Is now when I recruit a guy, I have several different managers that can train that rep. And I know that rep is going to get along with one of them and he's going to pick that team and he's going to join that team and have a really good experience with the company. But I don't have to be the guy that's out there in the field training every single person. So effectively for our outreach, we're able to bring on twice as many reps at any given moment than we would have been if I wouldn't have split those teams. Because then you don't have someone that's working for a greater goal. And I got to be the guy that recruits the rep, then goes out and trains that rep. And I, for that, like, is that what you mean by tact, I suppose?
Yeah, yeah, and I can kind of go in deeper of like certain things that I've seen. So the big thing is first is competition. So when you're able to do fire teams, you can organically create, you know, semi teams underneath one umbrella, and then that's something where one side doesn't want to lose to the other. So you're able to do a lot of competitions and give out daily, weekly incentives to keep people going and pushing to the next level. And on the other hand, you talked about you have the right leaders in line to be able to recruit with. That's one of the things that I've seen personally. Going back in my 2025, I learned what a team versus a group is. And with that, you know, a team is on a common goal, while a group is people that are in the same location, but they individually have their own kind of North Star. And so, with that, if you're a leader, you know deep down inside. I think you see it by the questions that you ask people, by their intentions and their habits. And the big thing for me that I've learned is really trying to find people that are team minded, that want to build and grow, and also have other people win just rather than themselves. So, going on to the next question, I think, obviously a lot of people in our industry become leaders because they're one of the top performers. And performance through sales doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a good leader. What do you think is some of the big things when you're a top performer, like you've been a top performer before, and now you're also stepping into leadership and crushing that? Like, what are some of the big things that need to be a mindset change from being just a top performer to leader?
Dude, that's a huge topic. I I love that. That's something I struggled with, you know. I repeat the last part of that question again.
Yeah. So, I guess what big changes do you have to make when you're just becoming a top rep into becoming a top leader?
Yeah, I think the first one is realizing that your success changes. Like it stops being about your production and it's about your team's production. And that's a big step up for a lot of people, depending on who they are. But I think there's a few things that have to shift. And I've had to learn this. The biggest one is your identity. You go from being a top player or top producer, like the best player on the team, but leaders been win, excuse me, by building the best team. And so the hardest transition I think is realizing that your biggest value isn't around closing deals anymore. It's creating closers, creating setters. But that identity shift I think is the biggest thing that needs to happen. The next one is like your influence changes and the control. And so top producers, you're going to rely on your personal effort. Leaders rely on influence, systems, culture. So the control target shifts because you can't have a dictatorship. You know, that's not going to work. The culture is going to define itself, but it becomes bigger than you. And I think the last thing is the way you view your goals has to change from short term to long term, frankly. So like high producers are like chasing like this week's sales this month, but leaders are focused on building people that are going to go and produce for years. So I guess yeah, the scoreboard changes, but as a rep, you know, you count your deals. As a leader, you count the number of people that are winning around you.
Yeah, really good. And really, this is the last question to wrap up the day. In your opinion, what gives someone an elevated edge when it comes to leadership?
We could go deep on this one. An elevated edge, like that's the $1 million question. A couple things that come to mind. I think practically, the biggest thing is being intentional instead of reactive. That's going to give you an edge. But what I mean by that is move on purpose. You know, it's like playing chess, trying to be 2 to 3 moves ahead and considering what consequences are going to happen from a different action. Kind of like you said, being present, but also being intentional, whatever you're doing. Don't find yourself taking calls at 5 in the afternoon. Like if you need to be training a rep or knocking and producing, like you have less time to do the activities that you used to have all day to do. So if you want an edge, and it's kind of everything we've covered in this call is going to give you an edge, but uh, I think that's the first one I can think of is being really, really intentional and don't be anywhere by mistake.
Yeah, I think what you're kind of saying, don't mean to cut you off, is that ultimately kind of the importance of probably having a calendar. For myself, I have a daily and weekly calendar in place where I know where I need to be at that point in time. And so I can really lock in and know that where I'm supposed to be is where my best spent time can be at for that my best spent time for that current moment could be. So if it's outside of that, then it just doesn't fully align, and it's something that I can get to at a later point.
Absolutely. And that's like the practical way to get an edge. You have to control your time. And you'll mess up. That's the thing is your calendar ain't going to be my calendar. But there's elements for sure that are going to be structured the same. But is there one winning schedule? Maybe there is. I haven't found it, but you got to know what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your team and make sure you're showing up in every way. for your team. But going deeper in that, or inward, actually, I think the biggest way to get an edge in leadership is self awareness. Truthfully, just know thyself. You know, I think the more that you can study your personal strengths, blind spots, emotional triggers, is going to give you an edge in any type of leadership in any arena. But finding ways to consider or observe the moment or challenge instead of being stuck inside of the moment, like sort of separating yourself, I think is huge in leadership. But like what I do often, my mantra, and I got this from Ted Lasso actually, but I'll just ask myself, what does this moment need right now? And as soon as I do that, it lets me step outside of the moment and view it from like a third party perspective. So that's just, a tool that I use, but I think the less you're reacting and the more you're intentionally understanding the moment, what the moment needs, what the team needs, what's coming next, it's going to help develop that intuition, and it's going to help your timing a lot with moves and leadership and different things. But deepening self-awareness, of course, you got to read books, you got to have mentors, you have to reflect on what went well, what you're going to do different, be open to coaching, and I think it stems into like true leadership. It's not a position or a role, that's a skill set that you train every day. And if you're skipping out on the inner game, like you're never going to reach your potential.
Yeah, fire. No, really appreciate you hopping on. Thank you for adding a ton of value, and this wraps up the show.